compatibility. It can stand alone, but it definitely should be compatible and not step on the footprint of other things. And next thing you know, none of your Bluetooth works or whatever. But we really do want to achieve at some point interoperability, and that's just the multi-user. Now, a key thing here for this group, when we go into this, I do want to point out, and Zach, this was sort of, it hit me when, we were talking further about this, because this is very product side focused, but there's the program side as well. And we're back to like, wait a minute, retainability and whatever else is there. It's like, we have things that we really want to make sure we hit on. So that's not included here yet. But we need this group to think about this.
So yeah, to kind of look at this and say, does this address adequately what is needed, or have we forgotten something?
Yeah, and so then, and there's another table there, table 3, and we refer to table 3, and it's not in the, oh, it is there. Yeah, in the slide. And this is where we took our best shot at just trying to give some examples. But this breakout group is gonna, it's like, hey, do a wash and rinse here and give us better examples or whatever, or more examples. And add rows again, so this is meant to be, an overarching tool for us, but this is where we're at. So,
one of the points, again, you'll notice the inclusion of products and programs. That's our attempt to say this has to work hand in glove with the technology providers in the industry that's out there leveraging technology and creating product, as well as the training institutions that are into the programs. And this was our attempt, again, to take the ilities and to come up with some descriptive text just as examples. Now, we're not saying that's correct. That was our thinking. So as you look at this in your work group, the breakout group tomorrow, if there's more descriptive terms, but we really want, not only for fire service training organizations to see themselves on tools like this, but also the technology developers to look at it and say, oh, I get it. I can be part of that. That speaks to me. I understand what they're looking for. So please consider it from that perspective as well.
Question?
oh, yes.
You can flip back one for a second, please. So obviously from the product standpoint, I understand that the company that's building the device, the hardware, and the electronic software behind it would be making sure that all those things come into play on the left-hand side. The right-hand side, are you expecting the hardware people to come up with educational programs that would support what they have, or are you looking at the educational institution to figure out how the product is going to blend into what they already have? Or both?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. And I know that's probably not the best answer, but I can envision on the program side, me sitting with the technology provider saying, I have a need to conduct large-scale drills involving multiple fire departments and agencies. I need you to provide me an to respond to my request for proposal that you can meet that. And they do, they come back with that. Now it's up to me as the training organization is to go back and put the additional questions onto it about, is it compatible? Is it available? Is it durable? Is it maintainable? So it's starting that dialogue, and I think it's going to be nuanced by who is using the tool as how they approach it in the conversation. The technology provider may say, oh, I can do a large scale drill, but at this, I'm maxed out at 5 users, and they've got to be in the same network. And then that leads the training provider to say, well, no, I want unlimited users, multiple networks. And they go back and they have a conversation so that they hone in on what it's actually going to look like, but more importantly, what's it going to cost? And then to figure out what it's going to take to maintain it. Again, I know it's not a perfect example, but it's kind of like how I was envisioning this to be used by both parties, both technology providers and the trainers.
I think maybe what I think I heard is, so say let's use the example of 5 users. So technology says, yeah, use 5 users. Now it's up to the training instructor or the program or the company or the organization, how are you then going to take advantage of that technology and apply it into your existing curriculum?
So again, in my thinking, The training organization pulls the rubric and says, I wanna train those 5 users to be advanced beginners in this skill, and I wanna do it in one single session. Now that's gotten down to the skill level and determining what it is, and we had a small discussion about this in the hallway. So if we use the word struggle, how do you define struggle? So the organization says to the technology developer, anytime the student pauses for more than 3 seconds to take the correct action, that's struggle. Technology provider says, I can build that in. The handles and everything on a pump simulator, they've got data in the background being collected. I just need to improve the data to answer that question. I can do that. Again, very simplistic, and it's looking at it at both sides using the tool, and I'm not saying I have the right approach, but that's kind of my thinking. Michelle?
Chief Boyd has built, and Ellen, Texas has built an immersive program that focuses on communications on the fire scene. Maybe Chief Boyd would be able to provide a good example here of how you work with your technology developers to refine and explain what you're looking for in your learning objectives.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, so I think the struggle is universal, right? And we originally were using a system that was actually sold by a company called FlameSim. Some of y'all may be familiar with it. It was back in 2009, and of course they end of lifed it because it wasn't making money. And so we essentially just built our own, and that's how we kind of came. You know, we used that experience of the 10 years of using a virtual environment to build one that met all that criteria. And we sit in a room and had all the instructors say, well, what do we like, what do we don't like, what do we want to see, and we created a document that was essentially architecture of how to build a virtual environment, the things that were important for learning and the things that were not. And so it was unique for us because we were the builders. I mean, we had a contractor that did all the programming, but we designed it custom for us. And it's largely just a virtual environment that you can burn stuff and go put it out with hoses, and it's a multi-user environment, it's cloud-based, all of these things that meet all of this criteria. I think that was really the way we were able to answer the question, the way we were able to develop that list of requirements and give that to our contractor was because we had experience of using virtual environments for many, many years and understood what the instructors told us was helpful and wasn't helpful. One of the things that we focused on, and it's an itty word also, fidelity, is high fidelity, low fidelity. Where did we need high fidelity, meaning how realistic did we need it to be versus unrealistic? Because our goal was to make it realistic enough to attain suspension of disbelief, is the term kind of used in the military. And so that's key, because the higher fidelity you make it, that increased cost. And so if we determine this could be a low fidelity thing, then we could make it very simple, and it looked simple, but it met the goal. So just the common thing we kept saying was, is it real enough? And so that's how we kind of, massaged some sort of an RFP to find a contractor that could build it. And we approached it like we were building a traditional fire training facility, like a concrete one, like you see out here. What requirements would we put together for that? And then we just kind of translated that to a virtual environment and had a contractor build it that way. So it's a unique approach that really isn't, it's tough to ask a technology provider to do that because they want to build something that can be off the shelf for many, many other departments. And so understanding that is kind of the hard part. I don't know if that answered the question. I tried my best.
It was all good.
Yeah.
Just to get to what Ken was saying earlier, right? Like it has to be a back and forth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it does. It definitely has to be, because I think there's a knowledge mismatch between computer programmers and fire service personnel, we both don't know each other's jobs.
Right.
So how do we translate? And I think that's where it's important to have people that have enough knowledge of both areas to be able to speak both languages.
So, to your point that you mentioned about, trying to get developers to understand the needs of your specific organization, how would it be if annually, 125 fire departments utilized a framework like this to go out with technology developers and invest in immersive learning tools? Would it be the same as what's happened in, I'll use fire apparatus, where here in the States, the NFPA standard is the basis, and that's where they start the dialogue, and the consumer knows pretty much what they're getting, the manufacturer knows pretty much what they have to provide, and they're able to move forward on that and provide what is needed. So, to your point, if we're able to get, and if not this tool, some other tool, so there is that ability for the fire service trainers, organizations, to speak to the developers in somewhat of a uniform manner, so that they can engage in the conversation, they can develop the product spec, and they can go to market. And if we had 125 fire departments doing that annually, what would that do to moving the integration of immersive learning technologies forward in the fire service? John Oates just went massive.
It'd be massive.
It's what they all need. They need scale. They've got to get to scale, because you said they ended life. They want end of life.
Yeah, because I think an important part for them is sellability.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you know, you talked some earlier about, do the instructors provide the training or the technology? The thing that sells is technology that trains. People want to buy something they can outsource, because we're all short people and short. And so, unfortunately, that's not always, so there's some middle ground there. How do we find technology that they can sell, because people will buy things that this will do it for me, but also have something then that has enough flexibility that we can have our instructors do the teaching.
And I'm gonna keep us moving along. Oh, Caroline,
Well,
let you
just
have
a little
final
bit off
word.
of that, I think that's where we're not at. I think there always is a need for an instructor guided
Mhm.
piece.
Yeah.
At some point, technology has to allow instructors to engage, to finish that communication,
Right.
to ensure that that interpretation of what's going on with the technology is correct in a field application.
And Jim, you need to respond to that, so.
And I think the instructor injection is always in the debrief. That in virtual and simulated training, it isn't just doing the exercise or the activity, it's the discussion after the activity of what went right, what went wrong, and where you can improve. And I think that all of this, the best stuff includes quality debriefing, after action, whatever you wanna call that. That's where I think we solidify not only the instructor leading that, but also the learning being achieved and being able to exchange that communication.
So I wanna keep going, but I
Yeah.
do wanna just add here, because somebody had whispered it to me, not specifically in this, but it's sort of like, oh, you know what, we don't need an RFP from individual fighter. We need an RFP from the organization, like NAFTD or whoever it is, Metro Chiefs or whatever. So I'm just gonna sort of whisper that back as the groups address this. Maybe that's how they can move forward on that. Okay, Preet, we'll give you the final word.
So just if you did want to get it on the Metro Chiefs radar, they would have their urban fire forums coming up where they come out with their white paper, so this might be
We did reach out to Otto.
perfect,
Yeah.
awesome. But consider what a hackathon design charrette around this could look like in a space. Maybe the IFC's Tech Summit International is a good place to test drive this and throw them in a room with those requirements and see what can be established that has some basis but does allow some configuring. You know, you can change your avatar when you play, Grand Theft Auto, but you still have the same game scenes that you're going through.
Yep.
So
And I will just say, even
Take that
back
one
to-
step further, across all technology applications in the fire service, not just training. This is woefully, this is absolutely missing in almost every tech application in the fire service.
In our illustration on figure 3 of the ilities from the research roadmap for smart firefighting, there was another little icon in there. It's the Global Cities Team Challenge, which has been renamed. But that entire thing was based on hackathons, as you just referred to, Preet, and that is an excellent model.
So we've gotta be done by
I
lunch.
know, so we really sort of got a little giddy up here. So this is the yellow group, and just to go back, and Zach, you had spun up some of this, and we took it and ran with it, and tried to flush it to the next level. But this is what we're calling key performance characteristics for a training delivery system. And you know, we've marched this out, and it's really meant to be as a tool for administrators and others who are just like, hey, we gotta fork up the money here, and like, you know, what are we, you know, looking for, and really have a mechanism. And Ken, go to the next slide. Go to the next slide, if you will. There was another part to this where we just sort of played this out, and you know, we're just throwing it back on the table here because we thought, this is a good tool. And you know, so we didn't want to lose this, and that's what you see here. So the yellow group will have this, and you know, a series of questions that will dig into this. So, anything further, and otherwise we'll turn it over.
So, that's it. Again, it's just our thought of what a tool might look like, trying to draw on some existing frameworks, and our best guess. We appreciate tomorrow in the breakout groups really talking about it, adding to it. You heard Casey challenge, did we get all the ilities? And I think, Chief, you mentioned fidelity, which we did not have up there. You mentioned retention ability.
We have the agenda, that's sort of our little roadmap for today and tomorrow. You've heard about the rubrics, the second of those handouts. We're going into the third of those handouts, which is the conformity assessment framework. And we're going to do a deep dive on this and just give you this background, much like we just did with the rubrics. But I do want to also point out here the discussion guide, which is the fourth of the handouts, which is just basically the instructions in the worksheets to go through for the breakout groups. But the rubrics, just to clarify, are two primary deliverables from this project. The rubrics on one hand here, and then the conformity assessment, which we're about to talk about. But of these two, you know, you've heard now the rubrics, and you're going to spend the first part of your breakout groups going through this and doing a deeper dive, and we just had a really good, you know, discussion with that. The rubrics are a tool, and they're part of the toolkit. The conformity assessment framework is arguably a more higher overarching pulling together of all this stuff. And both of these are our deliverables out of this project, but this is the result of a lot of discussion from all of us, including the earlier file project and the earlier summits that we've had and so forth. And this is where we're at. And we've really evolved a long way here, and there's a lot of stuff on the table to sink your teeth into. But now we're gonna just do a deep dive and give you the lay of the landscape of this thing. But we realize we don't have enough time for your breakout groups. What we've done is we chunk this thing. And instead of going through the whole thing for each of your breakout groups, of our 4 breakout groups, we're really, this is the outline of this thing, and we're gonna just march you through it in a moment. Other than number 1, the introduction and scope, which is background stuff on the first page of this, and the summary conclusions at the end, and the Annex A, which, thank you, Zach, provided that. And we said, oh, this is actually very informative and really helps, enlighten us in terms of how there's a distinct difference with the State Academy application versus more regional or local applications in terms of how that plays out. So we just included it as an annex, but there could be more, and there probably should be more. But where we're just going to take a quick look here and go through this document are what you see on this, this agenda right now, items 2, 3, 4, and 5. And they're assigned to each of the 4 breakout groups. The blue group, we use colors to try to not say 1, 2, 3, or 4. But the blue group will have number 2, And I guess people aren't assigned yet to the group, so.
Not yet.
Yeah. The red group will have number 3, the green group will have number 4, and the yellow group will have number 5. So let's take a look at this in a little bit more detail, but the illustrations I'm going to show you here are directly in here. You can refer to this as we go. Now, one of the first things we did when we went into group number 2, and you'll see this in there, there's a SWOT analysis. And we're back to, it's like, whoa, we clearly recognize from the file project, the voice of everyone here is hugely important. And it's not just the administrators, it's not just the instructors, it's not just the technology providers, and we realized even, and it was really, back to Utah, when we went there, it's like, we gotta hear from the students, and we, intentionally went and got the new recruits, and wow, yeah, they, the young generation, they think differently. And so that was hugely important. But the point here is that everybody's voice is critically important. And we thank you for your contributions. Next slide. Behold, Vitruvius. Who is Vitruvius? He was an architect in ancient Rome. He lived from 80 BC to about 20 BC. And he was drawn in this drawing by Leonardo da Vinci. And it's sometimes referred to, he called it Vitruvian in Latin, but it's sometimes referred to as the Da Vinci Man. It's the, how everybody knows it. And it's priceless. It's, I looked it up this morning. It's worth over €1 billion if somebody did try to, put a price on it. And this is our gender neutral version here. But we realized here, and here's a real point, and we're going to go through these parts of this. This is the overarching look of all these pieces sort of coming together. We realized as we kept reworking this, it's like, this is like a human body. I mean, it really is, and you're going to see this really strong parallel with different things going on. And we even spoke about it earlier, John. When we talk about data, it's the blood. It's like really what's going on here. So this is an excellent depiction and backdrop for these pieces. So if we can just go through.
And one point about this is when it seems to be a simple sketch, the interpretation of it is very complex. It represents earth, it represents water, it represents air. It has perfect proportion between the limbs. And it was done, Vesuvius himself was an architect, and Da Vinci chose him because of his attention to detail and proportion and scale and focus. And what this is trying to show is that things have to be in harmony, that there is an order about things. And while we just look at this and think, oh, that's cool, it's a drawing, back when it was created, it was symbolic of interconnectedness and the universe having an influence and understanding that relationship and using it to go and to get things done. And that's what we're going to do.
And there were numerous versions that Leonardo da Vinci did of this before they settled on that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an interesting story behind that. But this is figure 1 in your third handout. And at the core of this, we realize this is what we're talking about here. This is our key focus. And arguably, and you'll see this evolve, this is what effectively will be our torso of the Da Vinci Man, with the organs and the heart and the lungs and all these key organs, et cetera, et cetera. So, this boiled out of our earlier work where, the students at the very, very heart of this with the instructors, as part of that heart. But then it's all sort of being worked on, and we say centers of excellence, but it's where the training and the education is occurring. And so this is sort of the center of all this. Now, we did put, above this, the academies and fire departments realizing, they work together. I mean, they're trying to get this done. And clearly, we're back to how some of this is at state level, some of it's, metro departments or local departments or whatever, however the models are that it plays out. But this is the heart of the activity. But then we get back and it's like, we gotta have, what is the controlling sort of oversight of all of this. And this gets us back to what in our Da Vinci Man will be, you know, the head. I mean, this is where the brains are, but it's also where the inputs and the outputs are coming in and out all the time in our activities. And the rubrics and the other tools, they're here in the toolbox in terms of how this is all interworking. So these two together, you know, really are our first center of everything going on with this activity. But then, as we go further, and this next one, what is the foundation of all this? What do we stand on? And that's you know, what comes out of this. Now, as we look at the learning outcomes here, we realize, well, wait a minute, you know, there's some really key things. And this, what we call the career pathway, that matches what you see in the rubrics. And, you know, so it all sort of works together here. But a critical point is, it's not a point in time, it's a journey, it's a process. It is not a point in time, it's a journey, it's a process. The training and education continuum, the learning outcomes here. And through that, we recognize early on, you're much heavier with training and education, arguably, and less on experience, and vice versa at the end of your career. But throughout all this, these immersive learning tools, they have a role somewhere. What is that role? And this is where, you know, we want to use this to our advantage and use it for its strengths and make it more effective and efficient and so forth. But we recognize it's got its place. It's places where it doesn't have its place. So this is our foundation of everything we're doing. But then, and note that we're now, as we add this next part, technology providers, the integrators, we say hardware, software, firmware, but arguably this includes curriculums or providers of other stuff that are outside our circle. They're outside the circle. When we're trying to interact with them. So here's the huge takeaway from this overarching view, and this would be the one breakout group that's going to zero in on this. But if you go to the next slide, the key thing that's going on here is this interaction between all of us inside the circle, the Da Vinci Man, and what's going on outside there